Hello, my name is Alex Centeno, and I am a professional media creator. And I have been creating digital media for over 16 years. And when I started, I had a lot of experience with Photoshop and modifying still images. And when I started translating my editing knowledge to video, I realized that not all of it worked. Especially when it comes to color grading cinematic video. It just simply doesn't translate. And on top of that, there is so much misinformation out there, and it makes learning even harder because you don't know how professionals are doing it. So how do you learn? How do you learn what professionals do? So it takes a long time. This video is about teaching you the real way to make video look cinematic. In other words, make your movies look like the movies. I'll be recording my hand movements as well in the panel, so you see what I'm doing, but you don't need this at all. You don't need a panel or even the studio version of the Vinci Resolve. You can do this with the free version. So let's start by defining what makes a cinematic image. So a cinematic image shows a high degree of control where the eye is directed. So what are the common components of this image? Let's dim the light and bring them to the screen. Number one, a horizontal aspect ratio of 2.40 to 1. Number two, control of colors in the scene. Number three, control of focus on the subject. Number four, a high level of contrast in luminosity. Number five, purposeful camera movements or lack of. Number six, proper lighting of the scene. Number seven, intentional imagery and elements in the scene. Number eight, proper audio, believe it or not. Number nine, film emulation transforms. And number 10, film grain. 9 and 10 are kind of a bonus on the cherry on the pie, if you may. So what we're gonna be taking a look at today is how to grade, how to configure your images taken with a regular video camera to make them look cinematic. Are you excited? Let's get to it. All right, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Subscribers get all sorts of goodies, I think. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe not. No. Anyways, take a moment to subscribe if you want. I'm in DaVinci Resolve here, and this is a clip taken with the GH5 in Vlog. Let's take a look at the parameters that I have here. Project settings, color management. We're going to color science, color managed. We're going to wide gamut first and then output to P3 DCI because I'm in a P3 DCI display, but you can of course go to Rec 709 or anything else you want. Let's cancel. I'm already in Rec 709 from this, or P3 DCI, because this clip has been converted. So I have here, if you go to input color space, you'll see that I have selected Panasonic VGamut to Vlog or Vlog. So VGamut Vlog is converted into P3 DCI, and that's what we're seeing here. All right, so simple clip. And this is me in the front of my house, so nothing special, just a rifle. Everything looks exactly like a video, nothing cinematic about it. In terms of size, if we take a look at the size, it's 1920 by 800. So we have a more cinematic aspect ratio. Other than that, we're all normal stuff here. 24 frames per second may help. 30 looks well, so either one would be perfectly fine. let's take a look. I'm going to the color tab, and from here I have already pre-filled the naming of my nodes, but as you can see, no corrections have been added to any of them. All right, so pretty much serial nodes, the creation of serial nodes one after the other, and really nothing after that. In terms of timeline, I have a couple of things that I've done ahead of time, and I'm going to show you. So the first one, let's take a look at curves. The first one is an S curve, so it adds contrast and a soft roll-off of the highlights. So I'm just lowering the end of the highlights and then increasing the contrast of the curve with an S curve, and then this soft clip that I'm making on myself as opposed to using the soft clips. So pretty much just grab from this and then lower it a little bit. Other than that, nothing on that node. Final node is a LUT Film Looks, and in this one I'm using DC-P3 Kodak 2383 D65 white point. I'm using DC-P3. You can use Rec 79. This film looks actually come with the free version of DaVinci, so really nothing special there either. Excellent. So let's get started. Exposure. So the first thing, let's select here the parade, and let's start with exposure. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is not in my color, and let me select the primaries here, primary wheels. So not on the trackballs, but on the wheels. So if you're doing this without the panel, you would be using this as opposed to the actual trackballs themselves. So I am going to start by reducing here the lift and also reducing the gamma to bring this a little bit lower, because I feel like it's too hot, it's too bright. So I'm controlling the amount of brightness in the scene. And that's looking pretty good right there. Okay. Second node, I'm going to go to contrast. So I'm going to add contrast. And I'm going to change the pivot so that I'm increasing the contrast, but also changing what I feel that needs to be brighter. So the pivot point. And if you're not doing this with the panel, you'll be doing this with the contrast here and pivot here. All right. Next, saturation. So I'm going to increase the saturation. Something like that looks good. One thing that I learned the hard way was that I often thought that cinematic images were desaturated because I didn't see a whole lot of hues and color going on, only to discover that cinematic images are fully saturated. So they have high saturation, but they have a very high level of control of the number of hues that they're using. So that's a process that you do in production and post-production, but you want to limit the amount of colors that you have. You don't want it to be like a kid's playroom with yellow, bright reds, blue, greens, like all over the place, because it shows lack of control, and we're talking about increasing the control of your image. All right, so saturation, I added a little bit, and then we're going into looks. All right, so I'm going to start by moving the gamma towards my teals. Okay, and I'm being pretty aggressive with that. Now I'm doing the same with lift, but a little bit more towards the blues and a lot less aggressively. And now I'm going to do the same with the gain. I'm pulling down. And again, all these movements you can do without the panel. All right, that's looking pretty good, I think. All right, so this image is looking still pretty hot, pretty bright. That's what these two nodes are about. The first one is an outside node. I named it outside. We're going to add a power window. So I'm just going to go to the node and then hit power window with a circular window. I'm going to place it in my on my subject, and I'm going to change a little bit the size, the aspect, the rotation a little bit, and the softness. I'm going to soften it significantly. Something like that. All right, so now I have a mask that is very roughly around the subject of the scene. And I'm just gonna hide it. And in this particular case, what I'm going to do is reverse it. So just click on the button to reverse the mask. And I'm going to darken, starting with the gamma. So everything outside of that mask is getting darkened. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, because this is an inside or an outside node that I named inside, and you can see that it's pretty much the same. All you have to do is right click on the outside node and then add node. You would select add outside and it'll create this kind of node. Basically, it's the opposite. So if this has a mask, then we're going to do the mask that is reversed on the inside node. So this one is actually selecting our talent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce also, but a lot less aggressively than I did with the background. That's looking pretty good. Now we're going to be using one of the new DaVinci Resolve 17 tools, the Color Warper. I really like this tool. And what we're going to do, let's go to the vector scope. From here, if you don't have the skin tone indicator, you can just go to the settings and from here select show skin tone indicator, and this will show this line. And you want to make sure that your skin tones are actually touching on this side, your skin tones are touching this line or are directly on that line. And in this case, I'm just going to move all the other hues. So all these purples and things, I'm going to move them towards the hues that I want. Okay, so anything that is yellow in the scene, I want it to kind of move towards either neutrals or the actual tones that I want controlled, which are kind of teals. All right, that's looking pretty good. And then our final step, film grain. So to do a film grain, we're going to go, and let me just move this here a little bit. Open FX. From here, you can just do the search and type grain and drop it into your node. I'm going to select 35 millimeter and I'm going to move the grain strength until I kind of see it on the skin. Like I'm looking at this spot right here. You can of course play with this until you kind of end up at the spot where you like it, but that's looking pretty good to me. All right, so I think that this looks pretty good. Again, what we are doing is controlling everything about the image. We're controlling where the eye is placed, and we're controlling that by first controlling the luminosity, what is lit and what is dark. We're controlling the number of hues and the color and what sense you get from that color. And we're doing a cinematic display, so it's not 3:2 aspect ratio. It's not 16:9. It's actually a lot more horizontal. we're adding a LUT that is a film emulation LUT that replicates the color rendition and contrast of film process. And then we're finishing with some film grain, because film normally has this little texture that adds this feeling to it. All right. So I'm going to show you the finished preview, and then we can have final remarks. So, again, don't feel pressured to come up with cinematic images the first time that you use DaVinci Resolve. I mean, it took me a long time to figure out things that I showed in this video. Long time. And now you have at least a place to start. How do you make the images cinematic with a professional process? But don't feel like you have to do it exactly the way that I showed. You can actually experiment and do different things. For example, for me, one thing that I remember always seeing in professional colorists was that instead of using primaries, they always used logarithmic curves instead of using primaries. And what I showed you is that you can get to the result using the primaries instead of just using the regular primary wheels. You could use the logarithmics, or you can use the curves if you're used to Photoshop or other tools. So the important thing to consider is this. I'm just giving you guidelines of what looks cinematic. What is it that the professionals are doing, so that at least gives you a foundation to where to start without having to figure it out on your own. Again, if you like, and if you think there's value there, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell, comment either good or bad, and if you liked it, share it with a loved one. I hope you have a great day, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.